So imagine for a second, right, that you just hand someone the keys to the entire world.
Oh boy.
Yeah. You give them unlimited wealth, absolute power, zero rules, and absolutely no consequences
A
whatsoever.
dangerous game.
Very. Because history tells us that instead of becoming this, benevolent God figure, that person usually just reveals themselves to be a petty, miserable tyrant
Right, yeah. Almost every time.
every time. And today, we are doing a deep dive into why that happens. And it really brings to mind this maxim from General George S. Patton. He once said, "Never tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity."
It's a classic quote.
It is, and on the surface, if you're just scanning a management textbook, that sounds like standard, maybe slightly cliche advice on how to delegate.
Sure, just basic leadership 101.
Exactly. But we have this massive stack of philosophical reflections, historical accounts, and even modern sports psychology to go through today. And our mission is to explore the deeply uncomfortable truth that's hiding beneath that quote.
And it is uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's this radical idea that your inner substance matters, like exponentially more than your outer form, that who you actually are is ultimately exposed by what you do when literally no one is holding your hand.
What's fascinating here is that Patton's making a really profound claim about the actual mechanics of human character.
Mechanics, how so?
Well, he's talking about what happens when the guardrails of society or, direct instruction are completely removed.
Hmm.
When you take away the step-by-step manual and just grant someone total freedom, their true self effectively spills out.
Right, there's nowhere to hide anymore.
Exactly. It reveals their ingenuity, sure, but it also exposes their integrity, their resilience, and their foundational nature. The external technique or the title they hold isn't the core issue. The soul is the actual operating system.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if total freedom and unfiltered action are the only things that reveal our true character, why is human society so incredibly obsessed with using external status to define who we are?
Oh, because it's so much easier.
Right. We cling to our job titles, our university degrees, the corner office, the zip code. We use these things as shields. And there's this parable in our sources today from Anthony de Mello about a bitter gourd.
I love this one.
It dismantles this illusion of status so perfectly. Do you want to set it up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That parable cuts right to the psychological core of the issue. The story follows a group of these devoted disciples, right? And they're embarking on this sweeping, really arduous spiritual pilgrimage.
Okay.
And for some inexplicable reason, they decide to take a bitter gourd along with them. Like the vegetable.
Just carrying a vegetable on a holy journey makes total sense.
Right. And at every sacred stop, they take this gourd and they dip it into holy rivers, they place it on revered altars, and they expose it to, like, the most highly consecrated spaces imaginable.
Giving the gourd the VIP holy treatment.
Exactly. So eventually the pilgrimage ends, they return home, they cook the gourd, serve it to their master, and he takes a bite. And with this knowing, slightly cynical smile, he points out a glaring reality. All the holy water and all the sacred geography in the world entirely failed to sweeten it.
Wow.
The gourd is still intensely, overwhelmingly bitter.
Because, you can't baptize a vegetable into tasting like a strawberry.
No, you really can't.
Bitterness isn't a byproduct of where the gourd happens to be located on a map. It's the literal cellular structure of the thing.
Yes.
It reminds me of how people try to buy their way into competence, like someone dropping $5,000 on a custom-made vintage guitar, plugging it into a massive stadium amplifier, and assuming that financial transaction somehow translates into being a brilliant musician.
Oh, we see that all the time.
Yeah.
All the gear, no idea.
Exactly. The reality is character and skill are like a muscle, and that muscle only grows through the ugly, really unglamorous friction of daily resistance. That $5,000 guitar, or the impressive job title, is just the expensive clothing draped over that muscle. It doesn't build calluses. If you haven't put in the hours practicing your chords, standing on a famous stage is just going to broadcast your incompetence at a much higher volume.
That distinction between the muscle and the clothing is crucial to understanding how we deceive ourselves. Proximity to greatness, or, participating in elaborate institutional rituals, will never do the internal heavy lifting that only you can do.
You have to do the work.
Right. And the physicist Richard Feynman actually articulated the exact same mechanism despite having zero patience for parables or mysticism.
What did he say?
He famously said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool."
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, the disciples in the story completely fooled themselves. They thought physical proximity to holy things would magically override the biological reality of the object.
But the gourd didn't care.
No, the gourd did not fool itself. It remained exactly what it was.
Yeah.
It's a warning about how easily we outsource our identity to our environment, just because the inner work is too difficult.
Which raises a really terrifying question for me. What actually happens when the bitter gourd gets an army?
Oh, man.
Right, because it's one thing to fool yourself in the privacy of your own living room. That's personal tragedy. But when someone who has completely neglected that inner work, someone whose internal structure is fragile and bitter, is handed world-altering authority, what does that look like mechanically?
The mechanics of it are actually quite predictable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the author Ryan Holiday illustrates this brilliantly by looking at the Roman Empire.
Okay, let's hear it.
When you look at Nero, you see the ultimate stress test of a bitter gourd. Nero was handed the greatest external apparatus of power in the ancient world.
Unimaginable power.
Right. But power doesn't elevate a person's character. It merely removes all the external friction that was holding their impulses in check.
So it's just an amplifier.
Exactly. Because Nero lacked any internal substance, the removal of those limits was disastrous. He didn't use the empire to advance civilization. He used the ultimate authority of Rome to literally force thousands of people to sit in theaters for hours to watch his own mediocre musical performances.
People were literally faking their own deaths to get out of his concerts, right?
Yes, and he used his imperial leverage to rig the Olympic Games so he could win chariot races he actually fell out of.
I mean, that is just the most absurd, petty insecurity amplified to a geopolitical scale.
And that is the mechanism of power. Whatever's inside simply expands to fill the space.
Wow.
Now, look at the Stoics from the same historical era, or even modern figures. We revere Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the statesman Cato, or Admiral James Stockdale, who survived years of torture as a prisoner of war in Vietnam.
Incredible figures.
Right. But we do not study these men today because they held impressive ranks. We study them because of the unshakable internal architecture they built. We admire how they governed their own minds and held on to their principles when the external world was actively trying to destroy them.
They commanded themselves first.
Yes, which is the absolute prerequisite for commanding anything else.
And we see the exact same principle outside of, like, life or death historical events, right in the middle of modern professional sports.
Oh, for sure.
There is this fantastic insight from the golfer Rory McIlroy in our source stack. He talks about the concept of entitlement versus earning.
I love this framing.
It's so smart. He argues that the moment you walk around believing you inherently deserve your position, your foundation actually rots. You become fragile because your identity is tied to an expectation.
Right, you're just protecting a status.
Exactly. But if you wake up believing you have to earn your spot every single day, pushing against the natural resistance of the world, you undergo a transformation. You actually grow to fill the dimensions of the role, rather than just demanding the right to wear the uniform.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
that insight from McElroy about the daily, unglamorous choices we make transitions us directly into the concept of legacy.
Because it's not just about us.
No, your character is not just an isolated personal project. It's not just about feeling confident when you look in the mirror. It's about what we call the architecture of consequence.
The architecture of consequence.
Yes, every daily choice, every earned or unearned belief
Yeah.
is quite literally laying the bricks for the world that the people coming after you will be forced to live in.
And our sources use Theodore Roosevelt and Rudyard Kipling as honestly devastating case studies of this.
You really are.
These are two of the most influential, brilliant minds of the early 20th century, but they were also deeply romantic celebrants of empire, of martial glory, and of the nobility of war.
They really champion that whole ethos.
Right. They wrote sweeping books and poems championing these ideals, and they applied immense, suffocating pressure on their own sons to embody that specific vision of masculinity.
And the outcome was tragic.
The tragedy is absolute. Roosevelt lost his youngest son, Quentin, who was shot down in a dogfight over France during World War I.
Just awful.
And Kipling lost his son, Jack, in the trenches of the Battle of Loos in 1915. Jack was practically vaporized by artillery fire. They couldn't even identify a body.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. And Kipling, who actually wrote the famous poem If as a literal instruction manual on manhood for his son, he spent his final years writing agonizing poetry about the slaughter, including those haunting lines, "Have you news of my boy Jack?"
Yeah.
But honestly, it makes me wonder, How could men this intelligent be so utterly blind to the reality of what they were advocating?
It really comes down to the psychological danger of abstraction. When you are sitting in a comfortable study in London or New York, war is an abstract concept.
It's just ideas on paper.
Exactly. It's a grand narrative about honor and civilization. And looking at Holliday's historical analysis here, the fascinating part isn't really a debate about the geopolitical rights and wrongs of early 20th century empires.
Right, the sources are just looking at the mechanics of it.
Yes, the source uses this to demonstrate the sheer mechanical force of consequence. Roosevelt and Kipling used their massive cultural leverage to build a specific ideological machine.
They built the system.
They constructed a societal narrative that glorified an impossible romantic standard of sacrifice. And because they built that machine, their sons felt compelled to step inside of it.
And it consumed them.
It did. They created a profound societal debt, but their children were the ones who ultimately had to pay the principal.
I have to admit, that is an incredibly heavy realization.
It's sobering.
It feels almost paralyzing.
Right.
I mean, if our seemingly personal daily philosophies are out there constructing invisible machinery that might end up trapping someone else, maybe our own children, it makes you want to just stop making decisions altogether.
It can feel that way, yeah.
Is there a way to build an architecture of consequence that leaves an inheritance rather than a lethal debt?
It is a weighty concept, but the exact same mechanism works in the positive direction too. Seth Godin's story about Duncan Hines is the perfect counterexample here.
Wait, Duncan Hines? The cake mix guy?
The very same. Today, we associate that name entirely with boxes of cake mix. But in the 1930s, Duncan Hines was just a traveling print salesman driving across America.
Okay.
And at that time, eating at a roadside diner was a genuine gamble with your life. Food poisoning was rampant.
Because there were no real standards.
None. So, purely out of a desire to protect himself and other travelers, he started compiling a list of restaurants that had clean kitchens and safe food.
So he wasn't like a health inspector with governmental authority. He was just a guy with a notepad who didn't want to get sick.
Exactly that. But let's look at the mechanism of what happened. He published this list as a guidebook, and people started buying it and trusting it. Suddenly, Hines introduced a new economic incentive.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If a restaurant wanted the lucrative business of traveling motorists, they had to be in his book. And to be in his book, they had to clean up their kitchens.
That is brilliant.
He didn't pass a single law or fine anyone. By simply organizing information born out of practical care, he restructured the entire incentive system of the hospitality industry.
He probably saved so many people.
He saved countless lives of strangers he would never meet. He built an architecture of consequence, too. But instead of trapping people, his machinery protected them.
So if our actions and our character are literally the blueprints for the future, whether we are building a romantic ideology that gets people killed or a practical system that saves lives, we really need to stop looking at our grand intentions and start looking microscopically at what we are actually doing on a random Tuesday.
The daily habits are the raw materials. If you want to know what kind of architecture you're building, you just have to look at the bricks you're laying every morning.
Which perfectly sets up this incredibly blunt concept from Coach Dan John in our sources. He has this mantra, we get what we repeat. So simple, but so true.
And he talks about this idea of lagging indicators. We tend to view our lives as a real-time snapshot, but Dan John says, no, your current life is really just a printed receipt of your past choices.
A printed receipt, I like that.
Right. Your current bank account balance isn't a reflection of your financial discipline today. It's a lagging indicator of your financial habits from the past 5 years.
Absolutely.
Your physical health is a lagging indicator of your past eating and exercise habits. Your current level of expertise is a lagging indicator of how you spent your evenings reading or doom scrolling months ago.
Time doesn't care about your intentions.
Not at all. Time is simply a multiplier. It is the best friend of good habits and the absolute worst enemy of bad ones.
And the terrifying thing about time is it doesn't ask for your permission before it starts compounding those daily actions.
It just keeps ticking.
This dynamic is exactly what the Stoic philosopher Epictetus was trying to address. If you look at our modern corporate culture, we completely idolize busyness. We wear sleep deprivation and frantic schedules like badges of honor. Like, look how stressed I am. I must be important.
Right. But Epictetus refuses to validate that.
Yeah.
He argues that just because you are running around frantically does not mean you are industrious.
Huge difference.
He forces us to look at the mechanism. What are you actually compounding? Are your actions serving a worthy, intentional purpose, or are you just efficiently running in the wrong direction. Because if it's a latter, time is just taking your wasted effort and multiplying it exponentially.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you see Epictetus's exact philosophy echoing in the highest tiers of modern performance.
Oh, absolutely.
Look at a baseball legend like Derek Jeter. He talks about how when you have done the grueling, unglamorous, hyper-focused preparation in the dark, the actual game slows down.
The work is already done.
Exactly. The pressure evaporates because the preparation takes over. On the flip side, you have someone like ultra-endurance athlete David Goggins, who points out a fascinating social dynamic.
What does he say?
He says the loudest critics, the people constantly judging others, are inevitably the people who are going nowhere. And when you think about it mechanically, criticism is just a defense mechanism.
It's a distraction.
If you are locked into genuine, purposeful preparation, you literally do not have the bandwidth to obsess over someone else's effort.
This raises an important question, though. If deep, quiet, purposeful preparation is the signal of a life being well-lived, what is the noise?
What's the distraction?
Yeah, what is the psychological trap that makes us feel like we are doing the work, when in reality, we are just spinning our wheels? According to Ryan Holiday's analysis of Stoicism, the ultimate counterfeit of preparation is anxiety.
Wow. Anxiety. The trap that almost every ambitious person falls into at some point.
It is highly insidious, especially for conscientious people. We trick our own brains into believing that worrying is a productive activity.
Like if I'm worrying, I'm working on the problem.
Exactly. The psychological mechanism here is the illusion of control. We feel that if we are incredibly anxious and stressed about an upcoming event, it proves to ourselves how much we care about the outcome. We think anxiety is the down payment on success. But it is a toxic counterfeit.
It mimics the physical sensation of effort without producing any actual forward motion.
Precisely. It doesn't make you a more patient parent. It doesn't make you a sharper soldier or a more precise surgeon. The neuroscience backs up what the Stoics knew centuries ago. Anxiety just floods your nervous system with cortisol.
It's just pure stress.
It triggers your fight-or-flight response, which physically narrows your cognitive focus and depletes the exact energy reserves you need to execute your task. It is entirely destructive. The only useful focus is the preparation itself. Agonizing over the uncontrollable outcome is just burning your fuel on mental theater.
So, if we step back and look at the whole tapestry we've woven today, it all connects.
It really does.
We cannot fake our inner substance. The bitter gourd reminds us that no amount of external holy water changes our cellular structure. We can't rely on the $5,000 guitar to play the music for us.
No shortcuts.
Right. And that inner substance, once put into motion, becomes the architecture of consequence. Our choices are the bricks that build the world our children will inhabit, for better or worse, just like Roosevelt, Kipling, and Duncan Hines.
And ultimately, those bricks are just our daily habits.
It's exactly the lagging indicators of our lives, relentlessly multiplied by time.
And understanding that compounding effect means we have to be incredibly, fiercely protective of what we choose to chase.
How so?
Well, Seneca, the Roman philosopher, wrote extensively about the hidden costs of what society labels success. We chase a slightly better title or social validation or a bigger office, and we genuinely believe we are gaining ground.
We think we're winning.
But Seneca warns us to look at the actual transaction taking place. He notes that very often, the things we think we are getting for free actually cost us the most heavily.
Because of what we give up to get them.
We quietly trade our autonomy, our free time, and our mental peace just to appease the expectations of strangers. True wealth isn't the spreadsheet. True wealth is having the sovereignty to live by your own inner wisdom, rather than constantly bending to the noise of the crowd.
It's the realization of what is actually sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a beautifully grounding thought from Walt Whitman in our stack today that I think perfectly balances the intense self-discipline of the Stoics.
I love that quote.
Whitman wrote, "I have learned that to be with those I like is enough."
It sounds so simple.
It sounds simple, but it's a massive paradigm shift. The examined life isn't supposed to be this endless, agonizing cycle of self-flagellation where you constantly obsess over every personal flaw.
That's just another form of anxiety.
Exactly. The examined life is about intentional, grounded action. You accept exactly the reality of who you are today, but you hold a clear vision of the person you want to become. And then you simply do the unglamorous work to close the gap.
You step out of the illusion of status, you embrace the terrifying freedom Patton described, and you allow your consistent actions to forge your soul.
Which brings us to one final thought for you to carry into your day. We talked about Dan John's concept of lagging indicators, the reality that who you are today is just the printed receipt of your past habits.
Right.
Well, imagine for a second that a complete stranger was given a hidden camera feed of just your daily habits over the last 7 days. Nothing else. They have no access to your good intentions, your internal monologue, your grand plans, or your excuses. Based purely on the physical actions they watched you repeatedly take, who would they predict you are going to become in 10 years? And more importantly, are you ready to meet that person?